can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Corey Quinn. You can check him out at CoreyQuinn.com. And Corey, I always like to mention other episodes people should check out of the podcast. And
great.
Stuart Gandalf. Thanks, Stuart. The reason we connected was because of you, and people can check out healthcaresuccess.com. And we'll find out how you know Stuart. I know he definitely in the interview talked about, I listened to Corey's advice. It's the best. I'm like, who is this Corey person? Introduce him. Let's have him on the podcast.
Here we are.
Because he's so successful and, is listening. I'm all ears. So check out the one I did with Stuart. Also, I did one with Todd Taskey. He has the Second Bite podcast, and he basically helps match private equity with agencies and helps sell agencies. And so it's interesting to hear his thoughts on valuations and what he does to help increase value. And he calls it the second bite because, Corey, as you know, like when some of the companies he helps gets bought by private equity, they make a chunk, they roll some equity in. When they sell again, sometimes they make more off the second bite than they do in the first, which is an interesting concept. So Todd Taskey does a great interview. And there's many, many more. So check them out. A lot on the agency space, SaaS space. Corey, like me, geeks out on the agency space. So check those out. More on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. And at Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships. And how do we do that? We actually help you run your podcast. We are an easy button for a company to launch and run your podcast. We do the full strategy, the full accountability, and the full execution around that. Corey, we call ourselves the magic elves that work in the background to make it look easy for the host and the company so they could just worry about building the relationship and running their business. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. Corey has a podcast. We'll actually talk about that too. You can go to rise25.com and learn more, or email us support@rise25.com. We have a bunch of free resources on the episodes. Basically everything that we recommend doing, we share on the podcast. Top tools, software, strategies. We have episodes for that. So check those out. And I'm excited to introduce Corey Quinn. He's a 25-year plus record of success as an entrepreneur, a sales leader, a marketing executive. He had an in-house role as Scorpion's CMO, Chief Marketing Officer. While there, the agency grew from 20 million to 150 million in recurring revenue in under 7 years. Most companies, Corey, don't get to 20 million agencies, 20 million, let alone 150 million. He has a mission now to help 1,000 plus agency owners, probably at some point, tens of thousands, unlock growth by specializing in a vertical market. And I like to say, Corey, not everything, it sounds amazing, but not everything he's touched turned to gold. He's learned from the school of hard knocks.
Oh, yeah.
After college, he had 2 startups that failed after raising $3 million. I was looking at that, Corey. I'm like, I think you were just a little early. Like it was, if you had that startup later, it would have gone gangbusters. But 1999 and streaming service was, that's too hard. That's at that point. He has those. He's worked in the agency space back to 2007. So Corey, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, absolutely. I am super excited to be here, Jeremy.
So let's start off and just talk about what you're doing now. We'll get to, all the questions and, that everyone has been asking me when I said, I'm going to have Corey on, like ask him all these things. I have a list of 72 things. What did they do at Scorpion? How did they do this? We'll get to that, I promise. Right. But talk about what you're doing now. And I'm going to share my screen because I'm going to show your website a little bit.
Exciting.
What are you up to now?
Yeah. So right now, today, I am actively working on a revision on a book that I'm going to be shipping off to my amazing editor this Sunday. So this is like literal real time. And so I've hired this amazing editor to help me to create hopefully a really useful and impactful book. It is called, the title is Focus Vertical. And it's all about my 5-step process that I take my one-on-one clients through, my consulting clients through, which, by the way, are agencies, to help them to go from a generalist to a vertical market specialist. There are 5 steps. In the book, I teach you how to do it. There's a ton of resources and worksheets and templates and videos that support it. And my hope and promise with the book is that you'll be able to make that transformation by using the book independently. So that's a big thing I'm working on. Second to that, I would just say that I am extremely passionate about helping others to create a bigger impact in their lives, their families. I don't have all the answers, and I'm learning every day, but that's something that energizes me. And I hope to make that impact for myself in the world. And the way that I'm doing that today is, as you mentioned, I'm on a mission to help 1,000 agency owners transform themselves from an agency that is, very founder-led, founder-centric from a sales perspective, operations, and so on and so forth, to really scaling up. And the way that I know how to do that, and I can help people, is through becoming a vertical market specialist. That's what we did at Scorpion. That's what I do with my coaching clients. That's the people who I talk to on my podcast, people who've been through that transformation themselves and have built, in some cases, 7, 8-figure agencies in a vertical market space. I've interviewed on my podcast here on the screen. I've interviewed folks like Chris Dreyer from Rankings.io.
Chris. Yep.
Yeah, Chris, and a lot of the other folks who have taken this verticalized approach and have found wild success. So that's what I'm passionate about. That's where I believe I can help people to be successful. And so that's what I'm up to.
Talk about the 5 steps. And actually, one of my favorite episodes, and if you're listening, there's a video version of this, and we're at Corey's website, CoreyQuinn.com, and we're at the podcast page. My favorite one was the person who worked with you at Scorpion.
Oh yeah, that's like my first episode.
That was one of the first episodes, I think.
Yeah, that was for Jamie Adams. He was my counterpart there. It's all the way at the bottom. But there's so many good guests. He is instrumental in the growth of Scorpion. The quick story with Scorpion, I arrived in 2015. It was, like I said, a $20 million company, primarily working with attorneys, founder-led business. And he had kind of grown the agency to that point using really a lot of local talent, his friends and family from the local Santa Clarita Valley. And they really wanted to grow to the next level. And so I came in sort of from the outside, although I lived in LA, I came in from the outside. I didn't know anyone there. And so did Jamie Adams. He came from Reach Local. And the two of us kind of teamed up on a sales and marketing approach to really take the company from where it was. And I could talk about what that was like to, able to scale it up, not only within the attorney market, but we also went cross-vertical to home services and franchise and a couple others.
Yeah, it was interesting because in the conversation when you talked, there were, I think, 100 people at the company and 10 salespeople. And when you talked to him, there were 100 salespeople.
Yeah.
So the same amount of people were at the company was the sales team.
Yes, the entire sales team today was the entire company back in 2015.
So walk through the 5 steps for a second.
Okay, sure. So the context is this is a generalist agency that has been in business. They have a book of business, and they've been successful, but they've been unsuccessful, let's say, in scaling, getting to the next level. A lot of their business is founder led, meaning the sales are dependent on the founder going out and getting deals. They're working with businesses of all shapes and sizes. Every client, they have to learn their business. They have to It's a lot of sort of project management heavy type of engagements. And they realize that, hey, if I really want to grow and I want to grow aggressively, then the way to get there is you have to build more repeatable systems. And one of the ways you could do that is by focusing on a vertical market. So that's when I come in. That's what I can help with. The first step is,
are they convinced at this point, like someone coming to you, are they like, okay, I know I need to do this, or do they still need some convincing?
if they're not convinced, I'm not the right person for them. They're not ready.
Well, maybe they're open, but maybe I'm not saying they're closed off, but there's that constant conversation. Well, I have these, you've heard it a million times, right?
Yeah.
I have these, 30 clients, and, I don't want to neglect these like five, half of my business has come from this niche, but I have a smattering of this other niche. Like, what do I do, Corey? Right?
Sure. Well, the reality is that by focusing in on a vertical market, you're going to update your website, you're going to update your positioning, but your current book of business, they don't really care about that. They're not going to, up and leave you as a result of that. You refresh your website with different messaging. They don't, that's not a thing that happens. The reason why they would leave is if you stopped providing value to them, right? So as long as you're continuing to meet their needs and exceed their needs, that's not an issue. It's more of a focusing mechanism going forward. How do we become more streamlined and intentional and focused in everything we do? I think one of the big objections, I think I would call it an irrational belief or irrational fear, is that when you focus your agency on a narrow niche or a vertical market, you're effectively reducing the total addressable market, the number of businesses you're going to say yes to. And that just psychologically, this concept of, loss aversion, people just don't like, this idea of pulling something away from me. But I think what ends up happening, not for everyone, and this is not, I'm not preaching to say that this is absolutely the only way to grow an agency, but in these cases, they realize that they have to stop saying yes to everybody. And that's really the basis of a conversation with me.
Yep. So what's the first step?
First step is to choose the vertical market that they want to focus in on. And the way that I prefer doing that is to use data to help guide that decision. So it's not just, I kind of feel like we should be focusing on this area. And most founders will already have a feeling about which direction they want to go in, and that's fine. But the process I like to take them through, it is data driven, so that we can validate that feeling to make sure that, yes, indeed, they are good clients. They stick around for a long time. They generate profitable revenue. That your teams like working with them. That they meet the future vision of the company that you're trying to build, and that probably very importantly that the vertical itself, the market itself, is viable from a market sizing perspective. Is it a growing industry or is it a shrinking industry? So we need to go through all of these data points and this research to really uncover a high quality vertical that truly matches the agency where they're at.
Yeah, love it. Choose a vertical. Also, hopefully they have some proven success in that vertical.
Yes.
What's next?
Next couple of steps are really mapping the message to the market. Now that you've identified the market, who the buyer is, then you really want to get smart on how do we communicate that, hey, we're an insider and we know how to solve the very unique, sophisticated problems that just you, Mr. and Mrs. Plumber, are experiencing. So the way we do that is, number one, we interview their plumbing clients. I'm going to use the example of a plumber, but we interview their plumbing clients. Part of the decision that went into part of the data that went into the decision of choosing plumbers, doesn't have to be plumbers, but whatever it is, was the fact that we have evidence that, they're good clients. So we'll go interview them. And what we're doing is what's called a buyer's journey interview to understand what were they doing before they partnered with us, what changed that caused them to look for a change, a new agency in this case. What was the process they took? And we interview 5 to 7 of their clients to really begin to uncover and look for patterns in their responses. And we take those patterns and that informs our messaging and our positioning. The next thing we do is third step is competitive research. when you are heavily focused as a founder on relationships and you're networking to get deals, your competitors matter less because people are typically not shopping. If someone met you as a founder through Vistage or through EO or one of these things, they're probably not going to shop too hard because they're relying on that personal relationship that they have with you. But when you are attracting businesses who you don't have a personal relationship, they're definitely going to be shopping. And so that's why I'm a big fan of understanding what is the competitive landscape for that buyer. Who are they going to compare my agency with in the buying process? And what we're looking for in that competitive research is what is the messaging and positioning that these other agencies are focusing their marketing on. Ultimately, what we want to do is we want to arrive to a differentiated positioning for the agency. And we are going to take the data that we got and the insights from the client interviews, as well as the competitive research, and we will go through a positioning and messaging exercise where we're going to be getting clear about, well, what are the attributes our ideal client wants in an agency? And then how can we find some white space from a positioning perspective to really claim that? And then we also talk about point of view, which I think is really important, especially in the agency space, because it is so undifferentiated. Our point of view is ultimately our why. People, like Simon Sinek said, people don't hire you for what you do. They hire you for why you do it, right? So if you're unable to articulate your why in a meaningful way that the buyer recognizes and values, then you're effectively invisible. So we work on the point of view as well. Once we get all that groundwork, we've identified who we want to target, how we're going to target to them in a meaningful and impactful way. Then it's about going out and building inbound, outbound, and relationship-based marketing strategies. And these are not just generic strategies. These are vertical specific strategies. There are things you do when you have a vertical focus. There are things you do from an inbound perspective that are different. There are things you do from an outbound perspective that are different, and things you do from a relationship-based basis that are different now that you are focused on a vertical. So I talk about what those are and how to deploy those meaningfully so that you start to see results in the short term.
And then is there a fifth one? Or is that
is
a
the
combination?
fifth one. Yeah.
It's like kind of 4 and 5.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
So, I want to talk about, it's really interesting. I'm going to pull up your website because you eat your own dog food. Okay.
Yeah.
And you are always thinking of obviously the vertical, right? Hence your podcast, the go-to vertical podcast or the vertical focus, go-to market, vertical go-to-market podcast. And you are working with the copywriter now to do this very thing. And the funny thing is, you could, with your experience, be like, I don't need to do this. I know, I'm focused on agencies, but you're still going through the process. And, we talked before we hit record. It's like, I've heard you say agencies, and also you've helped B2B SaaS companies too. But you're like, no, Jeremy, right now I'm really just focused on agencies. Not saying you can't help B2B SaaS companies, but it sounds like you are really zeroing in on agencies. Yeah. What is some of the copy that you're thinking through with the copywriter and as you're interviewing your clients? How is this going to change what we see it now?
Sure. So the biggest thing is a functional change, actually. The primary CTA on my website is Let's Talk, which is more about let's set up a meeting. If you click on that, it's going to go to a form. And what I find is that the people who ultimately want to work with me are people who have joined my email list and they have listened to my podcast. And so this is not the front and center CTA that I need to have on my website. I came to that realization. And so what my new above the fold, in fact, most of the homepage will be focused on joining my newsletter.
Yeah. So here you could see, I think, wait, where was it? Your newsletter right here. So you can, I joined. You want a 1-minute high impact tip every day? Sign up, right?
Yeah. So the copy on the homepage is going to be really like the above the fold is going to be focused on what the big promises and the benefits of joining this. And then the rest of the homepage, or most of the rest of the homepage, is going to be about me, my story, and then the things that make me distinctive in being able to help the specific audience I'm trying to help. What makes me different and uniquely positioned to do that.
So from a copywriting standpoint, not much is going to change on that.
No, I think my story's not in there. It's not front and center today. So we're working on how do we articulate that, and the story is focused on
It's on your about page, but not on the main page. I mean,
yeah. And I mean, we're even going to change this a little bit potentially.
Yeah, no, I like to hear the thought process through that. I mean, because people can still contact you, right? But you're going to want people to sign up for your newsletter, deliver value to them through your blog and podcast first.
Yeah, exactly. And what I find is that there are a lot of agency consultants out there, and that's great. There's a lot of agencies that need help. That's great. But I think by giving them an opportunity to get on my newsletter, so I do five emails a week. So it's a lot of email. They're short and sweet. They're meant to be really high impact. But the point is that they will get a real sense for how I think, who I am, what I value, and how I work. And for some people, it's like, yeah, that's exactly, he knows exactly what we need. And that's really my intention is to bring them into the newsletter and then give them an opportunity to learn more from me.
So we'll walk through some case examples, Corey, but first, so the way people engage with you typically, I'm looking at your services page.
Yeah.
They can work with you privately, or private coaching call. And then there's an advisory retainer and then a vertical go-to-market roadmap.
Yes. So So those are the three. Those are all three of those. I'm personally involved. So there's not much of today. There's no products I have available that are not me like that. I'm directly involved.
Unless they get your book when it's out.
Right. And there's other things coming as well, but yes.
Cool. So let's talk about a couple examples, right? Yeah. And there was, before we were talking about agency targeting law firms and some of the things you did with them and how they grew.
Sure. So this is an agency that, like you said, they're targeting law firms. They're very aggressively growing, very charismatic CEO and chief marketing officer. But their sales, the specific go-to-market around the sales, they would generate a ton of leads, but their conversion rate on their leads was pretty poor. And so this was something where it was less about helping them to identify their vertical and getting really clear on them, but it was more around the work that I did at Scorpion with in partnership with Jamie around how do we get a sales team to start to really perform. Okay, and so it was.
Did this company? What did their sales team look like? Because I think you said they were around $20,000 a month in recurring revenue. What did their sales team look like?
It was a 3 to 4 person, sales team who were considered to be quote unquote closers. Okay. And they would receive a bunch of leads from these events that the agency would hold. So, but they were struggling with closing them. And part of the problem was that they were selling they didn't have a very strong sales training program, and they were selling the way that when I arrived, they were selling a very productized service. And so it became much more of a transactional sale where they're talking about, hi, Mr. Mrs. Attorney, this is the package, these are the features, these are the benefits, take it or leave it. And what we brought in was more of a consultative process where it was, okay, thank you for, hopping on the call with me. Tell me about what you're currently doing. Tell me about what you'd like to do. What happens if you don't make any changes, and what's blocking you, right? What are that consultative sale? And they realized that the value in this, they actually changed out a number of their sales team from people who maybe were not open to this new consultative approach to selling. And I helped bring in a new sales deck, a new proposal, the whole sales system. And as a result of this, they went from 20,000 in monthly MRR, monthly recurring revenue, in new business to 100,000 in monthly recurring business. So a dramatic shift where it was, the takeaway here is that they had a lot of potential in the business and the leads. The way that they were running sales was causing them to not maximize that potential.
It sounded like with certain members, they had to go to the drawing board and revisit that. What did you want them to look for in the new salespeople from like the consultative side?
The play there, because they wanted to move quickly, is that they realized they needed to find people who were already selling to attorneys in this new way. So people they didn't necessarily have to train in this new concept, but just basically bring them over and let them apply this existing play to the system.
So how do they find people? Do they?
They actually were very aggressive. They went and found some competitors who they respected, and they actually had conversations with those salespeople.
It seems like a lot for 20,000 a month. Does that seem like what a company doing that should have as a sales team? That seems, from the people I've talked to, that seems like a lot of salespeople for that amount of revenue.
Yeah, no, it was.
Wrong?
Yeah, no, and they just weren't productive. They just, it was not working for sure. I think the CEO was trying to fix it by putting more bodies in it, and it was more of a process and systems issue, and that more bodies wasn't going to fix.
So you come in, this kind of reorganize the sales process. What do you do as far as the sales training? You said the sales training program wasn't amazing. It wasn't how they wanted. It
was a Google Doc, basically.
Yeah.
And it was, here's the script.
Yeah. Because I know you've talked about this before on adding value. And I'm curious, with Scorpion, you've talked about, you're not going in there just saying, hey, these are the features, but you were trying to understand. And even I think you've talked about listening to their calls and actually getting deeper into the understanding of their business.
That wasn't that issue was not specific to this specific client, but in general with Scorpion. So we were targeting attorneys, and attorneys, the way they run their business is they have a gatekeeper, and the gatekeeper's job is to make sure everyone in the world, like Scorpion, does not actually get access to the attorney. Like they're screening out all these vendors who want to talk to the attorney. And so we did cold calling for a while. It was very unsuccessful. What we found out was, and I got this in part from the CEO of Scorpion, was to send them a gift as a first touch. And it's not just any kind of gift. Like you don't send them a pen with your logo on it. You send them something that is unique, that's striking, and that it leaves an impression. We called it a USI. And what that looked like was, in this case, cookies. So we would send these amazing gourmet cookies in a FedEx box overnight, and it would bypass the gatekeeper because the attorney would get all the FedEx boxes right on their desk. They would all open up this strange box, and in it was this beautiful tin of cookies. To open it up, and the cookies are amazing. Like you have to use amazing cookies for this, but the cookies in the tin would end up being shared around the office because everyone wanted to, try this amazing cookie. And then, of course, the next part of the conversation was, well, who brought the cookies? And it's like, well, this company, Scorpion. So we had this buzz around the office. By the time the salesperson called, it would, the conversation was, the dynamic was very different. It went from, resistance to the gatekeeper saying, oh, you're the ones from Scorpion who sent the cookies. Hold on, let me put you through to the attorney. He wants to talk to you.
The best way is through the stomach. I love it.
Yeah, it is. And it's powerful what sending a thoughtful gift ahead of time will do to warm up a otherwise cold prospect.
What else have you seen that has worked or that you've liked? Not necessarily that Scorpion did, but you've seen, because I think I saw on one of your sites, there was like big things of brownies. It was some kind of mix. What else have you seen that you like that may give ideas in other industries for people?
Sure. So, and that's a really good point, because at Scorpion, we did a lot of, we worked with a couple different verticals. And so we wouldn't, cookies kind of work everywhere, to be honest, because who doesn't like great cookies? But we did things like, for instance, in-home services during COVID. COVID obviously was a crazy and disrupted time for all businesses of all shapes and sizes. But we wanted to continue to support the home services vertical. And so we sent out a gift box to our prospects, and the gift box was a sort of a padded box. You open it up, and in the flap of the actual video, the box was a video player, like an LCD screen. And in there was about a 25-minute training, a free training specifically for home service businesses and how to weather the storm as it relates to their business and their marketing, right? So it was this beautiful free training. They'd open it up, And then in the actual box itself were N95 masks, those face masks, a book about leading through change from a thought leader in home services. So it wasn't like a Scorpion written book. It was a book from someone in their space. And then we also included, I think it was gloves, like the blue gloves, right? And we would send that across as just a care package. Like, hey, we're thinking about you in this tough time. We wanted to have this, and hopefully it's helpful, type of thing, right?
Yeah.
And yeah,
I know, Scorpion's not a nonprofit. So with the, that's not, I mean, I've seen some of those boxes. I've gotten some of them. They're not inexpensive, to send just without anything in them, just with the video thing. How do you decide on what your budget and what you're going to spend on something like that? And I'm wondering how that fits into the whole sales process. Like you mentioned, you're setting ahead of time and how that works. But.
Sure. So everything begins with the list. Like the list is the strategy, as they say. And so the way that we would do this, and the way that I've done this elsewhere, it's not just at Scorpion, is you really want to make sure that whoever you send a $30 to $150 gift to is super qualified. And you don't want to leave that up to our friends over at Zoom Info or Apollo or any of these places, right? You really have to be careful and intentional with the list. So you start with the list. It helps if you're verticalized. So if you're a vertically focused agency, you could make sure that whatever you send is has copy and marketing that's very relevant to the vertical, right? So the example is the box of the home service businesses. That was not just a generic box; it was specific to home service businesses. And so once you develop a really great list, again, depends on the dynamics of the business, but you really want to make sure that whoever you send this to, if you know that if you can get them on a call, that you have a good chance of closing them as new business. Meaning that they're super qualified, right? That they would be a great client. So you don't want to send one of these out, get them on the call, and realize at that point, oh gosh, this guy doesn't have any money or whatever it is, right? So the list really is the strategy.
It goes back to what you said was one of the steps. Is really goes back to interviewing the best clients, and then you're kind of documenting the exact attributes of those exact clients. So when you're paring the list down, you're looking at that.
Exactly, you got it. That's exactly right. So using evidence to be able to create a really high quality list. And, frankly, today, this gifting falls into the category of outbound. And the motion today is all about volume. It's about spamming your TAM. It's about how big of an email list can I get to send this, this series of 3 emails out. Like that is the wrong way to do it. I'm much more about quality of the list. I don't care if there's 100 people on the list. As long as it's super, super high quality list, then I will mail a gift to that person. And so one of the things that you can do to increase the likelihood that you'll get a meeting is send something that is unique, right? You want to send something that is something they've never seen before. No one's ever sent it. People are sending gifts these days. So think outside the box. You want it to be striking. You want to interrupt their day, right? You don't want just going to send something that's going to end up in a pile somewhere. You want them to put this in their hands. They want to turn it around and show it to other people. You want to leave an impression, and it has to be striking. Like you have to leave them saying, "Oh, this was interesting," right? So there's a high bar when it comes to sending these gifts. You can't just mail it in, as they say. Sorry for the pun, but those will help. And then what you have to do really is follow it up with a sales outreach. Just because you send an amazing box of cookies doesn't mean they're going to pick up the phone and give you a call. But you do need to call them, and at the right time when they're talking about you, right? When the buzz is all about Scorpion in the office, that's when you want to call, versus 2 weeks later when they've forgotten all about you, right? So there's a bit of I would call this a marketing-led sales outreach or outbound program. That's the way to kind of run it. And then the other piece of it is you don't just do it once, one and done, right? You need to be persistent and consistent over time. And so what that means is, I'll give you an example. So every dentist, in this specific example, every dentist gets a new website on average every 3 years. Let's just say.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, and the technology behind dental websites is expanding, and the functionality is changing. And so, if we got a list of that super high quality list of dentists, maybe multi doctor, multi location practices that we knew they had a great budget and that we could certainly help out. We knew that if we would market to them consistently, directly through outbound, through gifting over a period of 3 years, at some point during that, they will come to the realization that they need to update their website, and it's likely they're going to call us, at least put us on the consideration list, which is where we want to be, right? And so understanding what the life cycle of your product is, how often does your typical target audience typically shop, and making sure that you're present throughout that period. You do that to a large enough group, you're going to start getting some nice results from this.
How often do you recommend sending in that case over 3 years?
Well, it depends. So it goes back to your original question, I think, which is how do you afford all this? And the answer is, it is.
If you have $150 million, you can afford it. No, but like for someone who doesn't.
Yeah. So it's a great question. And I'm going to answer it maybe a little differently, which is that you really have to look at it from a lifetime value perspective. So for instance, if you make $10,000 a month, $10,000 a year on a client, and they stay with you 1 year, the lifetime value is $10,000. They stay with you for 3 years, it's $30,000. Well, why this is relevant is that you probably pay a lot more to generate a $30,000 client than a $10,000 client. And so it goes back to the business fundamentals. Are you providing a great value and service for your clients? And are they staying with you? And if they're not, then that's really where you want to start investigating, because the more you can extend the lifetime of a recurring sort of revenue client, the more value they are to you, and the more you're able to spend on the front end to acquire them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, direct response, you can measure that, like if like, okay, if these 100 people, I'm going to spend whatever amount, $1,000, and you get a client that's worth 10,000, you can reinvest in that program and start sending every single one of those people something every couple months. I want to point out that I did an episode, people can check out, with John Rulin of Giftology, who is a master at this. So I listened to that one because he's a master of gifting high quality things. But speaking of sales cycle, right? Corey, because in that case, you have certain things that with a dentist, like over 3 years. There was a company you worked with that actually you help with the sales cycle piece of things and shorten that sales cycle. And I think you have a certain name for it. So I'll let you go over it.
I'm not sure. I'll share with you what I think you're referring to, and you correct me if along the way.
It's the cookie strategy, but I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, that's what I was referring to.
Okay,
yeah. So this is a company that was struggling with getting and keeping appointments and then closing them. And so this is a gentleman who deployed the cookie strategy, which is effectively doing the list vetting and doing the sending out of the cookies, right? What we just talked about. And as a result of that, he was able to increase his lead to conversion rate, lead to appointment rate by 50%. So he was able to get 50% more appointments out of his leads just by running this play. And then the cost to book an appointment was down about 70%. Despite including additional costs, he was able to lower everything, lower the cost by reducing a lot of the other junk that wasn't driving value.
I love it.
Yeah. So there you go.
Let's talk about, the first step you said, which is choose vertical. Okay.
Yeah.
And I reached out to a bunch of agency owners, so I got some questions, but one of them is, in the agency space, someone, let's say, serves lawyers, right? You could even niche within lawyers, right? And one person was saying, well, they serve several lawyers, and PI lawyers has a majority, let's say, of their business that they serve, but they serve other lawyers, and the PAs they pay well, it's competitive, super competitive. So
yes,
they were kind of thinking through what other, how Scorpion did it, as far as what other type of law firms, should they think about, because it's, as they do serve them, it is super competitive space.
Sure. So it is, I can attest, it's super competitive, especially for personal injury attorneys. One of the reasons why is because personal injury attorney budgets are higher because the value per their client is higher, right? So they're able to spend more to acquire. So those are attractive candidates for agencies. However, they're not the only type of practice area in legal that is that has relatively more budget. I would say other practice areas are family law, criminal defense, potentially bankruptcy, immigration. These are all definitely viable. We targeted them at Scorpion. I would say, however, there is a way to in addition to just niching all the way down to, let's say, personal injury attorneys who only focus on trucking accidents with class action lawsuits. Like that's all we do, which is a very narrow market, by the way. There's another way you could do it, which is clarifying what your point of view is. And a point of view is really it gets down to the why. Like, why are you doing what you're doing? I'm not sure if I mentioned it on this, but Simon Sinek, he mentioned. So I'll give you an example of a law firm. Someone I recently interviewed on my podcast. It's Nomos Marketing. It's a husband and wife team. He's the attorney. She's the marketer. And the thing that the market that they're going after are the smaller attorneys who are underserved by agencies. They're the ones that don't get access to the sophisticated marketing strategies that the big agencies do. They care about the local little guy, the one-stop solo practice guy who really makes a big impact in their community. That's who they're for, right? That's their why. They want to support that guy. And so if I'm a solo practitioner, I'm looking at these bigger players. I'm also looking at this Nomos Marketing. Well, it's like, wow, like they're kind of built for me. Like I'd prefer to work with these guys because they get me, right? They're fighting for my causes, right? So that goes back to understanding what is your point of view, what is your why, and being able to articulate that in the market as a way to differentiate.
One of the questions, Corey, that someone asked, and it was more on the agency level, but we talked about there's an HR tech company, but someone asked me almost the exact same question, which is let's say they're stuck. They're stuck at a couple $1 million. They're an agency. What do I do?
Sure. Well, there's a lot of different things you could do, but with this limited information, I can share with you what I've done with a client that was in a similar spot. So, HR tech in the sort of the learning and development space. He had the CEO had been in business for about 5 years, had an amazing product that was far superior. That I learned just doing the research. I learned that it was a far superior product, differentiated product that than any of their competitors, and they were stuck at $3 million. The challenge is that they were serving 29 different verticals at this little $3 million company, 29 different verticals, and they were trying to compete against these massive HR tech companies that had $1 billion budgets. And so they were sort of doing the peanut butter strategy, which is like kind of spreading everything like super thin. And so as a result of the work that we did, we identified a single market that they need to focus on going through the process I mentioned. And that was chain restaurants. Those are the ones that they had the best clients, best results, great testimonials, so on and so forth. And as a result of that, they completely narrowed their focus, put it all 80% of the business on, I'd say 70% of the business on restaurants. And they began to go to restaurant conferences, speaking at the conferences themselves. In fact, they're at a conference right now talking about HR. They started doing a podcast tour, so on and so forth. And it really ultimately helped align the business from a marketing perspective, a sales perspective, a product perspective, which has made a massive impact in their ability to gain traction in the single vertical.
Yeah. I have 72 questions I need to get in the next 4 minutes. So no, but so many questions here. But I did want to find out, and you could answer this briefly, but from 20 million going to 150 million.
Sure.
What were some of the key things that had to change at which, I guess, revenue levels?
My goodness, so much. We had to mature as people, as a company. Like you can imagine, 100 people, you know everyone's name. 1,000 people,
100 people, I don't even think I know everyone's name, but yeah,
I didn't. but definitely, use a lot more infrastructure, a lot more. You have to be a lot different business at the 1,000 person. So I'll answer it maybe from a sales and marketing perspective, which I could speak more directly to. And so when I arrived, it was a small sales team, relatively speaking, and they were pretty much just fielding inbounds. Right, they didn't have to pick up the phone. It was like all the phone would ring, and they'd do a one call close, and they'd ring they'd hit the gong, right, and they'd have the gong in the sales office. It was a really fun environment. The challenge is that they were unable to grow as fast as the CEO, the ambitious CEO Rustin, wanted to grow. He's just an ambitious guy. He really wants to help people. And so that was one of the reasons why I came in. So we formalized the inbound process, which means that we made sure that we were maximizing the number of inbounds. But more importantly than that, I'd say, is bringing in an outbound strategy. So as we know, only 3 to 5% of any target market I'm trying to think if it's 3 or 5%. Let's call it 5%. But 5% of any target market is coming inbound per quarter. And so if you want to grow aggressively, you can't just rely on that, whatever percentage of that 5% who's doing the shopping to call you or to reach out to you. You need to do outbound. And it was by introducing this outbound discipline we talked about in the episode with Jamie, that it really helped us to quickly grow the business. Once we had established that, then it was about finding the next vertical, taking the best practices from our legal vertical, applying it to the next one, and then the next one. So it was that kind of motion.
I know we have 1 minute left, so I have one last question, Corey,
Sure.
I promise. But everyone can check out CoreyQuinn.com. It's CoreyQuinn.com to learn more. Last question is just mentors in your journey. Mentors in this agency space. It could be distant mentors to like books that you like, but who are some of the mentors that you've had?
Sure. Well, I'm currently in Dr. Ben Hardy's mastermind program. He's the author of 10X is Easier Than 2X. He's co-author with Dan Sullivan.
And Who Not How. Yeah.
Who Not How and Personality is Impermanent. And so I think all of his content's great. He's all over YouTube. I've also worked with Jonathan Stark, who is more of a consultant to soloists. I'm actually not going to be a soloist. In other words, I'm not going to be a one-person company. I have a lot of people around me. But I was working with him to really kind of get my consulting off the ground. There are people in the agency consulting space. I'm getting to know people like Drew McMillan from AMI, Agency Management.
Yeah, I've had
Institute.
Drew on the podcast. Yep. Agency Management Institute. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. And then Carl Smith over at the Bureau of Digital. It's a really high quality group of agency owners who are all in there together working through their growth challenges and supporting each other. So those are some of the great resources that I've been tapping into.
Cool. I love it. I don't know if you know Jason Swank, but he's another good one.
Yeah. Jason Swank. I was on his podcast not too long ago.
Boom. There you go.
Yeah.
Perfect. Corey, I wanted the first one to thank you. Everyone check out more episodes of the podcast. Check out CoreyQuinn.com. And thanks, Corey. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate the opportunity.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like $100 grand.